You're listening to Midlife State of Mind podcast, hosted by Erin, a midlife gal who dishes on all the challenges and opportunities that come with this middle section of your life. Each episode, you'll find yourself going between laughter and tears as she covers all the topics you need to know about midlife.
Welcome back to Midlife State of Mind. I'm your host, Erin Beadle. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode today. So today's episode, I want to talk about something that I've been seeing a lot of lately on social media. You know, there's always a lot of talk about how women support other women and that we all have to stick together and fight against the patriarchy. But then almost every single time that I am on social media, I see one of the many influencers that I follow who are answering a negative comment that has been left by a female on their social media. The comments usually pertain to either her choice of dress, even comments about how she looks, some of which are downright mean and hateful and just really shock me when I read them, that somebody would actually write that on someone's Instagram or Facebook page. And obviously it goes without saying that the negative comments, there is no need for them at all. You know, it's the old adage that my mother always said, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And obviously some people haven't learned that. So I really started wondering, I've been doing some reading about this over the past month or so because it just kept striking me as so just going against all of what we preach as women, that empowered women empower women. And I just was wondering, like, the question of why don't women support other women? I mean, like, really support them. And on a personal note, I have had people that I consider friends who have almost begrudged someone else for their good fortune or something that has happened that's good for them, almost undermining their accomplishment or whatever it is that they've achieved, not giving them credit for all of the hard work that went in behind it. But I digress. As I was doing research and reading articles on, why is it that women don't support other women really, there is obviously many reasons. As is usually the case with many gender-related topics, there's not one simple answer that can explain that issue. And then especially when it comes to this question of why women don't support other women, there can be many reasons. One of the things that I found interesting was that there is an invisible natural law in the female culture that helps to shape how women interact with other women at work and in personal relationships. There's a term that has been coined by a lady named Pat Heim and her colleagues in the book Hardball for Women, Winning at the Game of Business. That's called the power dead even rule. And even though this really primarily applies in business, it can apply in personal relationships as well. And simply put, this theory states that for two women to form a positive relationship, their self-esteem and power must be kept dead even, quote unquote. So if one woman moves ahead of the others in her circle, she violates that rule and she is thereby punished with usually indirect forms of punishment, such as aggression, gossip, snubbing, and then withholding friendship, all very passive-aggressive behavior. And this in turn triggers what is called the queen bee effect. That is where the woman that has moved ahead protects herself and becomes as tough as her male counterparts or men that she has modeled herself after as a protection. And it causes her to change her behavior towards everyone, including the women who she considered her friends and who considered her to be a friend. And all of this is a subconscious process that most women aren't even aware of participating in. It's not something that they've actually thought about and said, oh, well, Mary has moved ahead in her job and gotten a big promotion. And so now she's making more money than all of us and she's getting invited to all of these events. And so I'm going to purposely snub her. It's more of a subconscious thing that we're not even aware of. But then another reason that women sometimes don't support other women is that we're competing for spots in favored groups. And so we're less likely to bring other women along. It can happen in the workplace setting, but even in social settings. And we've all probably experienced some form of this. If you think back to elementary school, middle school, high school, where you had a friend and maybe you two were not in the popular crowd. And then your friend either makes cheerleading or does something else, gets a boyfriend that's a football player, and all of a sudden she's invited to all the popular parties and she's hanging out with the popular crowd and she would usually leave you behind. And sadly, this even happens in adulthood, not just in childhood. Sometimes the concept of women not supporting other women can happen in the workplace setting that has a very patriarchal dynamic where employees are influenced to believe that women are less valuable based on power and privilege and status. And so the workplace cultures tend to be more masculine and they praise competition over collaboration, which then makes it more difficult for women to truly support each other. So obviously it's a very complicated dynamic. It doesn't necessarily have clear-cut answers from what I could research about it. But I feel like, and this is just my opinion, that the real reason that women don't support other women is because whoever is not doing the supporting has a very poor self-esteem or self-image and maybe lacks self-confidence. And obviously, having a healthy self-esteem allows you then to recognize other people's talents and their attributes and their achievements with praise and being really happy for someone rather than comparing yourself to them. So there's lots of ways that you can improve your self-esteem, and I think that's really the core. Obviously, you can find tons of articles on how to improve your self-esteem, but I think personally that one of the best ways of improving self-esteem is avoiding comparisons to other people, especially when somebody seems more successful than you or accomplished more than you. It doesn't make you any less valuable because we all have our place and our attributes that are important in life. Personally, I know for me, because I spent so many years being a stay-at-home mom and seeing my peers that had continued to work and be successful and do all of this stuff, it can, sometimes be like, but, I just had to remember that I couldn't compare my work that I was doing at home with what other people were doing. And that you just never know what somebody else's story is, and you never know what they're going through in their own life, and you haven't walked in their shoes. Another thing that you can do is to really be kind to yourself and just allow yourself to even write down a list of things that you really admire about yourself. And then celebrating your own wins, not being afraid to celebrate when you do something that is an accomplishment. And of course, focusing on your strengths. I've said this often that when I focus on the negatives or the weaknesses, that's all I see. So when I turn my attention to focusing on the positives and the strengths, then that's what I really focus on. Obviously, where your attention goes, your energy flows. I think that's a saying. And then being assertive. So allowing yourself to recognize your feelings and that you can express yourself more effectively and not have that be something that's harboring in the background and just causing you a lot of stress. One of the things that, like I was saying, writing down your positive attributes. And so coming up with a daily affirmation that lists some of the really positive things about yourself, like I'm a kind person, or my ability to make others feel at ease is a gift that I have. Not being scared to actually say out loud the things that you have a talent for. And not undermining yourself. I think that's where when you undermine yourself, you're going to have a tendency to undermine other people. And when you have a negative self-image, you're going to have a negative image of other people. And lastly, I'll just say one of the things that you can do to help yourself have a new self-esteem is to learn something new. Maybe start a new hobby. Maybe read a book that helps you think in a different way. Maybe it's just taking a physical sport. Pickleball is huge right now, but maybe it's just even participating in a group activity that allows you to be collaborative with others and to celebrate others' wins. I would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on this. You can share them with me on Instagram or Facebook, Midlife State of Mind Podcast, or you can check out my website, midlifestateofmindpodcast.com, and you can send me a message there. I love to get input from listeners so that I can know what it is that you are experiencing. If you are a new listener, welcome to the conversation. I would love to have you hit the follow button so that you can stay in the loop on when new episodes are released each week. If there is any episode that has particularly resonated with you, and if you enjoy the content that I create, I would be very grateful if you would leave me a rating and a written review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to me on. And lastly, if you are interested in some additional ways that you can support the podcast, take a look at the show notes and you're going to see a list of my favorite things with links. And if you purchase them, then the podcast does earn a small commission that just helps to offset some of the expenses of producing it. Today, really quickly, I want to highlight one of my favorite products that I have fallen in love with, been using for a past 90 days. It's called Riman. It is a Korean skincare that recently launched in the US and Canada, and my skin has never felt and looked better. So check out the link. You can take a skincare quiz. I can make personal recommendations if you email me at midlifestateofmindpodcast@gmail.com. I promise your skin will thank you. My podcast is a place where we can inspire each other to make positive changes and embrace all that midlife has to offer. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back next week with another episode. See you then. Bye.
This has been an E Squared production.